2012, the Roswell Flight Test Crew attended Norwescon 35 in Seattle. On Saturday afternoon, we gave a talk entitled Own a Drone, Build and Fly Your Own UAV. Our presentation was recorded and edited by our friends at MediaFX Video Production, so that we could share it with you here on our YouTube channel. My sort of operating assumption was that you're maybe interested in building one of these yourself, or at least were interested in sort of how it went together. So I broke this down into two sections, all the parts that fly and all the parts that sit on the ground while you're flying. So the airborne system broadly flies into two basic things: flight and control, what's necessary to maintain, stable flight. And this would be equally true for a model helicopter or, anything like that might be. And the second thing is video and telemetry. This is where you cross the line over into being a drone, where the machine is in real time sending information back to you. So these are essentially the components you have to have.
Yeah, Barb, this is the basic components just to get something flying. You need, obviously, this is a miniature version of that, but you need 4 motors, in this case a frame of almost any kind. This is actually a wooden frame here for this little tiny guy. We use G10 electronic speed controllers. Those are off-the-shelf hobby controllers used to fly model airplanes with. They just control the speed of the motor, and they can do it extremely fast. So slight variations in speed are handled at 400 times a second.
So, and that's two things about that. One, you need an electronic speed controller for each individual motor. And then the second thing is that most of the input is actually not being made by you, the pilot. It's being made by the flight control system itself to maintain stability. So it's constantly spinning motors up and down just a tiny little bit in order to help it maintain its position in the air.
Yeah, essentially it's fly-by-wire. The computer's flying the craft, you're asking where to go. And that's what all the tuning's about. So basically programming the computer to handle the flight characteristics of each craft is a little different each time. But if if you're building one just like this, our settings are online. You could replicate this fairly easily. But if you're building it brand new for the very first time, you'd be spending a few days tweaking settings and whatnot before it flies stable.
And if you make small changes like put different propellers on, that's going to rejigger those just a bit. So it's a never-ending struggle until you've really got a system you're satisfied with. So then here are some additional components you have to have just to establish flight. You've got to have a battery, obviously. These are all lithium polymer batteries. We, whenever possible, use, like you see in the picture up there, a hard case battery, which makes it more resistant to impact. We were once flying the Nevada desert, and the machine came down, let's say, unexpectedly and rapidly, and had the great fortune to land on this sharp rock, and so we saw this plume of smoke rise. Yeah. When I got there, no fire, though.
Of course, you're around with the camera. I love that.
Well, he told me they're like flamethrowers when these batteries go, so I'm standing back filming it. At least let's have an autopsy. And so he reaches in.
Well, lithium polymer batteries react badly with sharp objects, water, and essentially what happens is they start burning. They become very, very hot, and they turn to ash almost immediately. But in that process, you get a lot of smoke, and it's why we normally use lithium polymer fireproof bags to keep the things in. I was flying along, and I think I lost a prop in flight. Just flew off, and of course, with a quadcopter like this, you lose one propeller, it goes down really rapidly.
One of the advantages of something like the hex rotor over there with 6, we haven't tested this yet, but we will, is that you can actually lose a motor or a propeller and stay in the air. There's enough of the other ones spread around sufficiently that they can take up the slack and keep you flying.
So, have you run into any issues with water vapor in the batteries?
Not yet. No, they're typically sealed. That's why the puncturing is bad. So they're basically wrapped in plastic, and that one there is a hard case, so it has a shell on the outside of the plastic. So unless it were submerged completely in water, it wouldn't find its way in there. Because they're made for radio-controlled cars, which get wet, and boats, which get wet. So.
Although on the subject of water, particularly the yellow one has actually been weatherproofed. We took it to a car wash once just to make sure. That video is available online. But in any event, so that one's actually been designed for all weather operations, and it's flown in rain and even snow once, so it's passed that test. Brian already kind of talked to you about the flight control system. That's basically the electronic brain that allows the aircraft to be stable in the air. Yes, sir?
So if it were to lose a propeller or a motor, would the ECS and the flight control system automatically adjust for that?
It's not programmed to do it. It doesn't go, oh dear, I just lost motor 4. A 4 rotor would just fall, just because there isn't enough left to do that. If the hex lost one, what would happen is no doubt the electronic brain would still be sending to that motor, hey, spin for all you're worth, but obviously it wouldn't get anything. And so it always just wants to maintain equilibrium, so it would tell the other 5 to do what they had to do in order to pick that up. So it wouldn't like enter a special subroutine to do that, but what would happen is it would just respond with what it had to do its mission of just maintaining stability. Then you gently limp it home and hope that whatever killed the first motor didn't come for another one. So, and then the last component is the receiver there, which you see depicted.
Well, the receiver is the other half of your radio. Essentially, when you are controlling the craft, there's something to receive at. This particular one is an off-the-shelf model, essentially bought in a hobby shop. And there are ones for longer range, they'll get you miles away. This one here is good for a couple thousand feet. And they're relatively inexpensive. They come, you can buy them for $50, you can buy them for $100. And it's, as you go up, they get more sophisticated, longer range, typically more reliable. As for the flight control system, you can either build your own. There are plenty of open source projects, like this software I have on this computer, this little guy is completely open source. There's one that uses parts from Nintendo Wii. You can take apart your nunchuck and get the accelerometer and gyroscopes out of that one. It flies very well. It's
don't work after that though. Not as nunchucks and Wiimotes.
No. Yeah, so if you're willing to sacrifice some Nintendo components, you can get yourself flying pretty inexpensively. A little bit of wiring there, or you can buy, like this little one here is a Chinese model. The Chinese have come up with a new one which is just brilliant. It really outperforms anything else out there at the price.
It's a remarkable piece of technology. All right, and then now we cross over from, like I said, with all that stuff, you could build yourself a fine little RC helicopter and go out and have fun with it. This is where you cross over into having the capability to send it outside your immediate site and fly it around remotely, like what you saw in the opening video. The first thing you obviously have to have is a camera, and we've been using the GoPro.
Yeah, the GoPro works really well. It's a high-definition camera, records on board, so we just let it do its job. The downside is it's kind of heavy. So we have the protective housing on there, which keeps it essentially waterproof mostly, and impact resistant. We've dropped those things from 100 feet up, no problem. Or you can use a small security camera, either way. Those are available, they're 20, 30 bucks online. They do the job just fine. They don't record locally, of course.
So then you don't record, or you record on the ground, or have a separate recorder on board. Most of you can't see this, but again on Raven over there, she actually has 2 cameras, the big GoPro for recording HD, and then up above I've got a smaller camera, which is just a small black and white security camera. That one works in low light, although that's not been much of an advantage yet. But the other thing is the fixed wing guys, the guys who are flying large fixed wing drones over, miles, like the GoPros because they record nice high definition, but don't consider them reliable enough because they're going to be in the air for 45 minutes or an hour before they come home. So I've actually got a switch on my remote so I can change from one camera to the other in flight. So if one was to get damaged, battery was to run out in the GoPro, I just flick a switch and I'm now flying home on the other camera. Again, Raven was really built for redundancy and operation in, suboptimal conditions. So obviously to see that video, you need a video transmitter.
These are normally used in security, but they've been repurposed for our uses, and they're available on a number of different frequencies and wattages. High wattage will require that you get a ham radio license to operate them. Low wattage, you'll still get pretty good distance out of them, a few hundred feet, with no license required. They're very low wattage, and they're very light, they're very small, and very durable. Just run off the main power of the system, so you can have your second battery form or main battery powering this thing, and they're an inch and a half or so as far as their size.
Megahertz, 2.4 gigs, that type of thing?
Yeah, and there's 900, 1.3, 2.4, 5.8 legal frequencies in this country.
And now when I press this, just to alert you, a video is going to come up for about 30 seconds, and it's going to show you the telemetry. What you see here, it doesn't look like much, but in the lower right-hand corner is the actual material components that give you the telemetry. But there's a GPS antenna, a system to sort of interpret and store that data, and then something which gives you what we call an OSD, an on-screen display that shows you, gives you your aircraft information. I'll sort of talk you through it while it's running. So that's what I'm seeing while I'm flying. I'm sort of down there in that structure in the middle of the screen there. That was me changing from one camera to the other. On the left, you've got your airspeed. On the right is your altitude. The bottom's a compass. Below that's distance to home. Over here is a GPS data. I've got 11 satellites in view with extremely high precision. And up at the top is my battery information. I'm running at 10.5 volts, so it's going to be time to come home soon.
And the important part is the home arrow in the middle there. It tells you where home is, which could be important. Actually, I was in the desert once flying along. I'm like, uh-oh, where's home? I was too far away to hear it, didn't know which direction I was in, and I had to rely on him to find it in the sky.
Yeah, I have a question about the lithium polymer batteries when you're flying on that. Is your voltage Decline linear?
No,
No.
it does not. Unfortunately, well, it declines linear for a short while, then it hits about 10.3 and could drop off at any minute.
Oh, okay.
Like immediately.
So it's an 11.1 volt lithium polymer battery is kind of the rated thing, but fully charged, ready to fly, it's going to be about 11 or 12.2, 12.3,
yeah.
somewhere in there, and it goes along fairly nice. And like I said, that gets under about 10.5, 10.3. The next thing you know, you're at about 9.8, just in a heartbeat, and that's your bird's going to fall out of the sky at any second. And then above there, you see the pack voltage, which is frozen at 10.51 there. Below that is milliamp hours of 2611. That's counting how many milliamps you've paid out of the battery. Now, our most common flight battery is 5,000 milliamp. So in theory, you could fly until that read 5,000, but in theory and practice are the same, but in practice, they're different. The power that can actually be stored in the battery or pulled out of them depends on a lot of factors, including temperature. So it's more important really to watch the pack voltage, and that milliamp hour thing, it can be useful, but not as much as you might hope.
Well, the faster you pull it out of the battery, the less overall you're going to have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the heavier craft, is again fully laden. It's going to be like 5 minutes, give or take. As where this little guy here could fly for like 15, 20. So it's just
On a much
smaller pack, exactly.
battery.
So
Where do you get the gyroscopes for stabilization on this?
there are three sources. Basically, you can buy this is an open source brain which was assembled essentially from a guy in Australia. You can do it from Nintendo. You can take apart Nintendo Nunchuck, Nintendo Wii Motion Plus.
So those
Wii Motion Plus has got the gyros, the Nunchuck's got accelerometers. You marry those up on a circuit board, and suddenly you've got.
Yeah, free software, Arduino, you're good to go.
Okay.
And then and these are the three we've used. There are probably a dozen or more
Other ones, yeah.
different types of flight control systems, that come fully assembled with different characteristics. One's called Quadcopter, and its primary emphasis is for acrobatics. So it's much less, stable, which we really like because we're flying cameras. But if you want to make it flip end over end over end, that's a great one for you. We prize stability, and right now the NASA, that Chinese one, is about the best for that. It's just remarkably stable in the air.
Have you thought of any type of emergency system to save the aircraft if it's crashing? You push a button and like a balloon pops out around the thing and it becomes a basketball?
We've thought about that. We haven't come out with any practical way of achieving that. My best idea so far has been a ballistic parachute. So you pop it, it shoots a parachute out away from the rotors, parachute hopefully opens, and it drifts to the ground, but it's weight.
That's the way they did it on Mars.
Yeah.
You get the heads-up display onto the video camera.
Basically what it is the telemetry system we're using, you patch the camera into telemetry and back out of it, so it's OSD on the craft, beaming it back, that video back.
Okay.
This is the video stream as it's coming to me. What I did was the video receiver on the ground, I just put two video outs, put one into a recorder, and the other one was going into my goggles I fly with. So yeah, that's exactly precisely what you see as the pilot.
Yeah, so this is the quality video you could expect just by having a recording on ground station.
Do you have anything like a Google Earth map of where your craft is while, this is you, this is where it is, so you can kind of look down at a map and see your craft is that way. So if you orient the Google, panel display, you can actually not only look down to see where it is, but hopefully be able to look up and see it oriented in the same position.
We're not currently using that type of system, although it does exist though. The price goes up quite a bit though.
Yeah.
That's the main problem. Is this is inexpensive and that's not, but it's available.
What's the price for a little one as opposed to a big one?
Well, these little ones here, you can pick them up for about $150, give or take, with all the parts required to build one and build it yourself. They're not that expensive to get into. If you
They're
want
just expensive to get out of.
Yeah.
How much would it cost to buy one fully built?
There are people selling similar ones online for about $500-600, give or take. But then you have to add your own camera to it. So a GoPro costs, then the transmitter costs. So GoPros are a couple $100. I think I bought one on Boot for $150 or so.
And so literally every week, and I mean, we keep up on this stuff, but there's some new developments, some new technology. I mean, it was just, 6 weeks ago we first heard about this NASA thing, and now we're flying it. We think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But, 6 months ago we'd have been like, what? Well, you couldn't do that. It's not possible. So it's very rapidly evolving. And so that's part of the problem when you get into this, is sort of choosing the best technology that exists at that moment anyway.
Well, and not hanging on the technology that doesn't work. So if you try it and try it and try it, doesn't work too well for you, just get rid of it, go something else. Because like I've got a KK board which I loved for a while, but it had no stabilization. So when you twisted the copter, it kept going that direction until you twisted it back. Now, some people like flying those. They're great for acrobatics, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I want my camera to be stable. I'm flying with goggles. I don't want to wear with the craft flying into a building by accident, as where the boards we're using now are automatically stabilized. So that's one thing less to worry about, essentially. So make sure it can fly itself.
The GoPros, as you can kind of see there, the GoPros have a very wide field of view, and you can get cameras with wide-angle lenses, etc., etc. But the sense is almost very much that you're like looking through a soda straw, because you get really nervous about the tree you can't see over here, even if it only exists in your imagination, because you don't want to, end up in that tree, do you?
No, we don't.
No, you don't. So in any event, so you're that, and typically we fly with a spotter, so he'll be flying, and I'll be just letting him know, hey, you're coming into some trees, watch your right, and obviously we trade off.
Other than GPS and the video sensor suites, what else you been flying? Talking temperature, baro, humidity, that type of thing.
Nothing like that. Barometric pressure only for the auto leveling features of our systems. Well, our on-screen display uses the GPS for everything it has. We actually have other sensors we can attach to it, but they're not necessary because it'll get our altitude based on the satellites we've got.
Sure. The other, if I might just jump in there, the other problem, I'll let you get back to that, is that a lot of those, like the altimeter, they have a pitot tube, a tiny little pitot tube, are all built for fixed wing aircraft, and so obviously you're not going to get that.
It totally hoses those.
Right. So yeah, we just use the GPS.
Cool, thanks.
So as far as stabilization is concerned, are you saying that unit actually directs power to each of the blades to keep it level?
Absolutely.
So you're just giving it gas, but it automatically distributes.
Oh yes, yeah. It literally, on a good day, you can just take your hands off the radio and hold it in your hand. It just floats there.
I've actually seen one video where basically they pull it out of a backpack, flip it up like a frisbee, and once the thing, once it's been trimmed up beforehand, I mean, it'll just lock in and hover there where they threw it up.
Absolutely, I've thrown this one successfully twice.
Ask him how many times he's unsuccessfully thrown it. It's kind of an art, and of course the best thing about video is you can edit. Like, we can edit out what I just said.
Exactly.
We won't, but I mean, we could.
5-gallon bucket, right?
So in any event, with that, please keep the questions coming. We'll just move on to the ground station. This is everything you have to have on the ground while it's in the air. Generally, you look like the Borg. You've got so much coax cable going back and forth, but basically you need a control transmitter and a video receiver.
Well, basically the transmitter is what controls, like the right stick handles your pitch and roll, left stick is yaw and throttle. With the multirotor, you just throttle up to go up and then pitch forward to move forward, and that's it. It flies like an airplane once you're in forward motion, unlike a helicopter, which gets a little wobbly in fast forward motion. Really simple. Like, this is a DX8 transmitter. It's got a couple accessory options to flip from acrobatic to stable mode if you want to do some loops or something, or have accessories like lights or cameras, trigger. All you really require is a 4-channel radio, which those are the cheapest kind, luckily. You can buy them for 30 bucks if you want to. That'll do a good job. Again, for a starter, something inexpensive is great because you're going to beat it up and grow out of it eventually, but,
Well, hopefully it won't beat your radio up too much. That's not going into the sky.
Well, at the other end, perhaps, the receiver.
And to return to your question, yeah, like Brian said earlier, it's essentially fly-by-wire. You're not saying, okay, propellers 2 and 4, speed up a little bit. You're just telling it, hey, go left with the stick, and the little brain on board is making all the calculations. Okay, we're going to drop the RPMs on these motors a little bit, pick them up over here, and that's going to pitch it over like that. So yeah, I mean, it's doing all that because, did you say like 400 times a second?
Yeah, that's
each motor's
currently. So if you want to go this way, these two speed up a little bit, these two slow a little bit, and it kind of maintains that as you're holding the stick over. Let go of the stick, it goes back to normal again. And same with forward and backward. As far as the yaw is concerned, two are turning in this. These two turn in one direction, those two the opposite direction. So it speeds 2 up and then slows 2 down to move it this way.
So it's exploiting, you guys all know how a basic helicopter works. And if you didn't have that little rotor on the boom, it would just, the body would spin the opposite direction of the main rotor. And so you've got to have that anti-torque rotor to cancel that torque effect in the back. This just uses offsets. 2 of them are turning one direction, 2 of them are turning the other. So when they're all turning at the same rate, it's going to hover there because it's essentially balanced off torque-wise. So if you slow down the 2 that are turning counterclockwise, the craft itself will begin to yaw in a clockwise direction.
I'm also going to ask if those control systems for the phones, the iPad and such, if any of them use the Bluetooth to control the craft directly.
The most famous one to do that is the Parrot AR drone, made by a company called Parrot that makes cell phone accessories for the most part. But that's a little quad rotor which you use your iPad or your iPhone, and it uses the Wi-Fi connection. So obviously your range is going to be a lot more limited, and your bandwidth up and down is going to be a lot more limited. But that's how that's doing it. And this is just the rest of the stuff you need on the ground. Is obviously a battery to power the video receiver. The video receiver, which usually comes in the same box as the video transmitter. And then antennas is where there have been some interesting breakthroughs, and those little bent-up paper clips are the, believe it or not, the state of the art.
Yep, right now the big thing with antennas with these things is their polarization. A circular polarized antenna doesn't matter which direction the aircraft is going in, it'll receive a good solid signal as very high multipath rejection. Multipath being if the signal gets reflected off a building or off of some other object, you get echoes in the picture and video loss and therefore control loss. So these antennas here were designed many, many years ago, but more recently implemented for these little crafts here because they're constantly moving around. And if you're on buildings or trees or anything, you lose video. Those can reject bad signals very, very easily, and they really are quite nice. We tried antenna setups that were 6-foot poles. We tried patch antennas. We tried a bunch of different things, and they just don't seem to work as well.
If you're going to fly, use these antennas. Next up is, obviously, you've got to see your video on the ground. And here we've got two main options, which are video goggles or a video display, basically a small television set.
Well, the main thing about the video goggles is very immersive. Your world disappears, you're in the craft. Personally, I find it's easier to fly because you're not looking at the craft and losing your orientation constantly. Bad thing is it causes vertigo in some people. If you can't play video games for too long, you won't like this. So, the screen's nice for that. One of the biggest things to figure out when buying a screen or goggles is something that does not go blue when the video goes hazy, essentially. A lot of the newer devices will just go to a blue screen just for it to be more pleasant than static, but that's not what you want, because if you've got a semi-static picture, you want to see it versus seeing nothing at all.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than you're out there flying, you're buzzing along, the video's getting kind of glitchy, and then it goes to a blue screen to protect you from the terrible glitchy video, because then you've got nothing. I'd much rather see that haze and maybe catch home plate of the baseball diamond we're flying over, even for a split second, than just essentially be blind. It's really harrowing when you lose video altogether.
Are these goggles gyroscopic? When you move your head, does it actually skew the camera?
They can be, yes.
We don't do that, but
we're not doing that with ours, but the company who makes these goggles, Fat Shark here, has a gyroscope built into it which ties into your radio, which can tie into two servos in your camera to look around. Essentially more used in the fixed wing. Because as fixed wing, you want to be able to look around a bit, not just be fixed in your...
Whereas if we want to look left, we can just turn the whole craft left, and I'd always be worried that if you looked left and didn't quite look back to true, when you're flying a rotorcraft which can maneuver in all dimensions, you could lose your orientation. Moving on, and now they've sort of moved to how do you learn to fly. Just for the record, I did this exactly the wrong way. I strong-armed Brian into building me a quadcopter like that one, but smaller. We took it out into the middle of a baseball diamond, and I proceeded to smash it into the ground about 3 seconds after liftoff. And then the second time after he rebuilt it, maybe got 5 seconds, and then 8 seconds. That's an expensive way to learn and probably not the most efficient. So Brian did it the right way, which is he started with a simulator after I got wise and started running out of spare parts. That's what I did. There's some really excellent simulators run on a computer. Comes with an actual, and those of you who were in the class earlier today saw this, actually has a real radio, and some you could even use your real radio to plug directly into your computer and just learn all the basics. It's not a perfect substitute for being in the field, but it's a great way just to begin to build that muscle memory for this is what it looks like when it's going away from me, forward, left, right, turning. It's a chance to make a few thousand mistakes without ruining parts.
Do you find that translates really well to the field, considering that you're using a simulator to fly a thing that you're going to look at a screen to fly once you're out in the field anyway?
You've keyed onto something there. I mean, to fly first person on the computer, to put your camera on board in the computer is ridiculously easy. I was sort of hoping, I'll just skip that part and fly it like an airplane, because I can fly an airplane, but the problem is you need to be able to handle the thing while you're looking at it, to bring it in for a landing, I don't know, whatever it is. You have to be able to do it. So no, it's super easy to fly, like you say, when you're just looking at a screen in the computer. But when you're flying it for real, there's a lot of nuances and subtleties of the aerodynamics, and so you have to know how the thing flies just when you're looking at it, what we call eyes-on flying. And so there's just no substitute for just flying a simulated aircraft, and then, as I suggest here, a real aircraft, but one like this that would fit in the palm of your hand and won't be hurt if it drops, to begin to build those muscle memory skills. Then you move on to the big craft.
Are there autonomous control systems?
Yes.
Yes, that's our next big project.
Well.
Yeah, well.
Pretty well, actually. The same Chinese manufacturer who makes our current brain makes an amazing device, which literally you can go to Google Maps, say go here. It just goes over there and hovers for a while.
Yeah.
Let's say if you lose control, you lose your radio, you turn your radio off, it'll hover for 30 seconds where it is, it'll come back to you, hover for a little while, then it'll land.
So it gives you a chance at each point to regain control, and if you don't, it'll just land wherever it took off
If you get
from.
the blue screen to death, there's some hope.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, that's our next big project. Look for people in your community who can help you learn to fly. Every hobby shop has got lots of flying clubs. Sort of, we put up our website and started talking to people, and just people started coming out of the woodwork who are not only flying RC, but who are doing this exact project. And then I want to close with our big sponsor shout out, because we do this with the support of some great sponsors. UAV Products, which is where you can buy the NASA, and also the Wukong is the name of the really sophisticated one with the GPS built in. Hobby Parts is where we get all of our batteries, motors, kind of general.
The cheapest place online you can get them.
That sort of stuff. And Hobby Wireless does a great job supplying cameras, video transmitters, that sort of thing. But that's our panel. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.